Everyone, hi. Welcome to our third and final sculpting pass over our Emily Blunt portrait within Blender. During the first pass over this head, we went from 0% all the way up to 80%. We had essentially sketched out the likeness without paying too much attention to being exactly precise in terms of proportions or in terms of perspective. We simply wanted to move fast to capture the likeness efficiently. It is during the second pass over this head that we really addressed any type of major proportional issues or anthropometric issues. We had really taken our time to make sure that our proportions were all correct and that we had no more issues that were introduced because of misreading the perspective within the scene or within our references. I like to refer to the second pass as going from 80%, which is for me essentially the sketch of something, all the way up to 90%, where we can really tell that something has been captured properly, but there still is room for improvement. Of course, as we go through these different passes, progress seems to slow down, and today won't necessarily be any different. Because we have fixed all of our major proportional issues during the second pass over this head, it means that we can now do what everyone loves to do when it comes to sculpting, which is to endlessly zoom on our model and obsess over the smaller details. And we can do that because we know that our proportion, our facial structure, is correct. I like to refer to the third pass as going from 90% all the way up to 95% or so, which is usually a pretty good place to stop most likenesses. Going beyond that, most people won't really be able to appreciate the effort that you will be putting into them. And I also like to think about the number 95% because it actually kind of communicates something, which is that likenesses are never truly done. They are only abandoned at some point. There's always going to be small differences, but we all have to ask ourselves the question at some point. Is it worthwhile to continue to obsess over those differences, or is it good enough? If we want to get good at something, we obviously have to push beyond our comfort zone, of course. But there is also a point where pushing further is simply useless. So that's why I like that 95% figure. Now, of course, some people will want to go further than that. Some people will naturally find that they are able to go further than that. But if you are at the point that you are obsessing over the last little details over the head that you are working on, it's really worth to ask yourself the question, is my time better spent doing what I'm doing right now, or could I use that time to do something else instead, like work on the textures, work on the shaders, or work on the body? Like it or not, our time is limited, and we obviously always want to make sure that we are using it in the most effective way. Now, I'm saying here that this is our last sculpting pass, but it doesn't mean that we are done with this head, because after we have completed today's class, we will do a retopology of this head, which will in turn allow us to do UVs, and which will allow us to start to work on the surface details, skin pores, wrinkles, all those high frequency details that we want to throw on there to do a very nice, polished, finished piece. During this third and final sculpting pass then, we will also do a deep dive within the anatomy of all of the facial features of our model. So the facial anatomy classes that are on outgang.studio are very complementary to everything that we will talk about today. If you haven't watched those classes yet, that's fine. But if you have watched those classes yet, they will definitely help you quite a lot to understand everything that we will be talking about today. But as much as possible, I'll try not to go too quickly over the anatomical details, that even if you haven't seen those classes yet, that you can still get a lot out of this particular class. So it's all about sculpting today and simply refining all of the details that we have created so far. Let's do this. So we have our Emily Blunt portrait that is here. And as you can see, we have completed the albedo pass last class. So that combined with this nice turntable that we have here for me really helps me to really judge this likeness. And in fact, it makes me feel a lot better about the likeness too, because I remember when we had completed the second pass together there, I felt in some ways that we had taken 2 steps back, but also, or rather we had taken 2 steps forward, but 1 step back in the process. Because I did distinctly remember saying that I felt as if I had lost a little bit of the essence of the face after our second pass had been completed, even though the face was structurally much closer to our references there. And actually looking at the model now with the albedo that has been set up, I feel as if we are actually really close to the likeness itself. She definitely looks like Emily Blunt here. If we compare here, you can see that there really doesn't seem to be that many divergences that we can really spot. We are quite close, but it's the moment that we really start to worry about the details here, that we will really start to spot minute differences left and right, either in the shape of the eyes, in the shape of the corner of the eyes here. This is not quite the same. What I want to do first is actually just to do a major shape pass over the head, because especially adding in the hairline actually makes quite obvious that there are some changes that really need to happen to the forehead here. If you take a look at this particular reference that is right here, and if you compare it with the 3D model, you'll see that in our case, if you compare the curvature here, right? So we have our frontal eminences here, and those are just two really, really big bumps that we have on the forehead. So, and you can see that there really seems to be the silhouette line, if you will, really changes direction quite abruptly where my cursor currently is. And we have this more or less straight line that kind of recedes towards the back there. So we have a really nice angle break here at our silhouette line. And I just find that we're just not really there on our 3D model here. So here I have more of a gentle curvature that's kind of happening here. And I just feel as if I'm just not feeling the frontal eminences sticking out in front of the head or in front of the hair as much as what we have here. So those are the kind of subtle things that we want to really spot and address at this particular stage. So we're just going to start with that here. The best thing I can do at this stage is one thing that we had done during either the first pass or the second pass, which is to set up on a separate monitor a quad view that allows us to see our head from multiple points of view at the same time. That will really allow us to read the silhouette of the face and really spot those minor differences that I have just mentioned here about the forehead. So let me go to view here, and we will just simply duplicate this particular area here. Let me move PureRef over. Let's go here and duplicate area into new window. Let's take this, move it to our second screen. And here, let's turn on EV again. And this is a really good tip that some of you have given me. So during the previous classes, when we had done this kind of quad view setup that we are about to do, if we just put our cursor here on the bottom left until it changes to a cross like this, then we can actually click and drag, and we can actually pull out another area, but while still being within the same window. So that's really, really cool. That's a great tip, by the way. And then for each view, we can actually set up a different angle. We're going to start with these three references that are here just to lock in the neck, and then we will move on to the forehead and other shape changes afterward.
5 minutes later.
So I've set up with his three cameras here, as you can see, and we can see that there are actually major differences that need to be addressed as far as the neck is concerned, and a little bit as far as the forehead is concerned as well. If I just show you this particular PureRef that is here, actually, if I do this back and forth here, you can see that I'm actually just on the PureRef window right now, even though it is transparent, and I'm holding down Control-Alt-Shift and doing a left click here to play with the opacity of our reference here. Yeah, take a look at how much of a difference there is here for the back of the neck here, see? So, of course, within this reference, her head is turned to the side here, so whereas on our case here, our head is looking directly forward. So, of course, that does have a bit of an impact as to the kind of shape that we can expect to have on the back of the neck and on the neck in general, too, of course. So I do want to be wary of that and not try to overly match it. You can see that on the front too, we have quite a major difference here. But these differences here, so that I can see here the volume change that needs to happen over the back here. You can see I need to like actually carve out a pretty big chunk here of the back of the neck. And on the front here, I seem to have some space to move the front of the neck here a little bit forward. And that actually seems to match with this view that is right here. If you remember, this is one of the views that actually gave me quite a hard time before, mostly because of the shape of the cheek. And you can see that the cheekbone still isn't there. In fact, you can see I've more or less matched the brow bone. I've matched the where the jaw is, but I don't have cheeks that are as prominent here. You can see there's a little bit of a difference here. So that definitely also needs to be addressed. So we can see all these little problems that just start to appear a little bit, right? Even though our likeness is there, when we do look at it quickly here, we can see all these little divergences here, right? So you're probably starting to understand why it takes time to go from that 90% all the way up to that 95%, and why progress seems to slow down. But yeah, what I wanted to say here was that for the back of the neck here, you can see that there definitely is also too much volume that needs to be cut out. Finally, if we go back to these references here, what I have pointed out here about the frontal eminences needing to stick out a little bit more is very obvious here, right? Even though we are talking here about millimeters, as I do this back and forth here of my reference with its transparency, you can see that the neck here seems, or rather the forehead just seems to stick out just a little bit more here. You can see that we need to actually flatten out part of the skull here. As I play around with the transparency here, the back of the skull is actually too high, and which is actually the same on this particular reference here. We can actually fit the hair. The skull may be a little bit too big in general. In fact, I think that I actually need to reduce the size of this image here just very, very slightly. Let me just do this here. I think that, or rather make it bigger so that the 3D model is just slightly smaller, because the jaw of my 3D model should not be at the same height as the jaw on the reference, because her mouth is just very slightly open. But yeah, lots of changes to do. Also under the jaw, as you can see, there's a bit of a depression here. I don't have it on my model. We can actually see, if we look at other references, we can actually see that she has a bit of a depression there on other references as well. It's always good to just really just triple check these kind of potential changes with other references. But yeah, there seems to be a bit of concavity there, right? So we can definitely sculpt out a little bit of mass there, I suppose. So yeah, so those are all very minor changes, but we are making a likeness, so it is good to address those. So let's start with all of those, and this view will stay there, and then we will be able to compare our changes that we are doing. As we are sculpting on our main screen, we will be able to see the feedback directly on our secondary screen and our secondary views to see if we are doing the right changes or not. So let's go to town. So let's start with the move brush here. We could obviously just carve using clay strips, but using the move brush here, I think is probably a better idea here. So it's going to be a little bit faster. So let's move all of this here further forward. We can move the front of the neck as well. And as I'm doing this, I am keeping an eye out on my secondary screens to really judge here, as you can see, the changes that I am doing. So, okay, let's go with our move brush then. Let's just address all these issues. So part of what's happening is that I just don't have a neck curve, if you will, that is just curvy enough this here. So we have the skull here. Here we have the neck, of course. The back of my neck here was just a little bit too flat. So just adding a lot more curve like that really helps to make those references here look exactly the same. I want to be wary of pushing this too far using this back 3/4, although using this this view that we have here, this profile view here, yeah, we're pretty much where we need to be here. So that's actually good, but we could definitely actually adjust the shape of the skull as well. As we have mentioned there, we need to flatten a little bit the top of the skull. I feel as if I actually should be doing this using our sculpting brushes. That would actually make me feel a little bit more comfortable. So let me switch over to that. Now those shadows, they're coming from Eevee. You can see that when I am sculpting here, you can see a little bit of shadows under that are kind of appearing there. If this becomes bothersome, then we'll play around with our Eevee shadow settings here. But I think this more or less only happens when we are subtracting there. So yeah, we'll see what happens and if that is bothersome later on. Although I do like to see the model with that great lighting, there's definitely value in also switching back here to this very basic material and basic view setup. Because sometimes, especially when we're looking at little crevices like these of skin, it may just simply be just a little bit too hard here to be able to accurately judge what is happening there when we have to deal with all those shadows here. So there's definitely value in sometimes switching back here to this very basic display here. Okay, so right now I'm trying to sculpt out and carve out everything here that needs to be carved out so that it matches with our profile reference that we have. I'm not really worried about trying to make something nice here. What I'm doing is that I'm essentially sculpting, and then on the side view here, while I'm sculpting, I'm simultaneously, as you can see, looking at the feedback that I am getting there. So the only thing I'm doing right now is just trying to match the volume. And once we have the volume down, we can worry about refinement. In fact, we'll do a whole pass later on during our third pass. But before we're done here, we'll do a little bit of a polish pass over the whole head to make sure that everything is nice and smooth as it should be, which for me isn't 100% smooth, but definitely smoother than what we currently have. So we'll just worry about that later. Right now, let's just worry about getting those volumes down properly here. So you can see here, my only goal is to match this particular reference that I have. And you can see that we still have some, even the jaw here, actually, I actually need to either pull the jaw back. In fact, the whole ear, in fact, is not even where it needs to be. Yeah, once again, these are great changes to do with symmetry because, no one will really be able to appreciate that from profile, one ear should be closer, further forward, or higher up than the other ear. I mean, perhaps in terms of height, maybe that makes a difference when you're looking at someone from front view here, but from profile view here, in terms of depth for the ear, that really doesn't change anything at all here. So let's take the ear, let's move it back a little bit. Yeah, these are some major changes that need to happen, right? Ideally, these are changes that you do address at the second pass, but keep in mind too, like as long as you're refining something, like this concept of first pass, second pass, and third pass really is a way just to kind of help us to kind of set a bit of an objective for each pass that we are doing. And when you do create a likeness, it's very easy to get lost in there and never know whether you should worry a little bit more about the details. Details are fine. Details are not fine. Should you be worrying about the major shapes at this stage, the smaller shapes at this stage? Like breaking things down to like primary, secondary, or rather first, second, and third pass for me, it just helps to structure my idea as to what is important within the moment, so that I don't start to worry about the details before I actually should, and to really start by worrying about the major shapes. But sooner or later too, you shouldn't beat yourself over this too. Like most of us will do multiple passes over something like this second pass that we had mentioned, this third pass that we're doing right now. You may do them over multiple sessions, so don't really beat yourself over that. As long as you're doing progress, it's all that really matters. All right, that's better. Not perfect, but better. But we can see there too some of the changes that we haven't been mentioning here. So yeah, my ear's a little bit too high here, it feels like. And here too, you can see that this part here is a little bit too high. Here, it also feels that the cheekbones are just slightly more protruding on the reference than what I have on my 3D model here, right? So yeah, although we can see that the lighting here, now this is one of the reasons why it's beautiful to have this light setup that is right here. I can actually switch this over to Eevee here, and we could actually rotate our light rig around, try to really get the light here to light her from the back here. Let me take the spotlight that is behind, and I can go in here within my light settings. I can boost the power of it here, and I can actually compare, because she has this rim light too, right? You can see she actually has a rim light within the picture there. So I can actually try to match that. The lighting should be describing the same kind of shapes. You can see that the shape of my neck isn't there. I need a little bit more curve here. You can see there's a bit of a gentle curve that is there. I don't have it here. You can see that the side of my neck here is completely straight there. I suspect though that my light is a little bit too high here, but this is actually a bit of an interesting thing to do here. Let me take my light that is here. Let me bring it down and rotate it a little bit towards the top here, so that this is actually closer. Like we can see where the shadow is here. So this is the shadow that is cast from her ear. You can see here the shadow here. So that actually gives us a very, very good guideline here if we want to match the position of our light here. So let me bring the visibility back down. So we want our light to be pretty much exactly here. Let's rotate it higher up. And there you go. We have the same lighting now. Clearly, there are some changes that needs to happen. You can see all those little changes here that are just appearing for us to be adjusted. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so once again, if our move brush here, bring the neck here a little bit further in. So of course, you could work directly from this particular view here, but the reason why I'm not doing this is because sometimes like these kind of changes, well, they may ask us to perhaps go in here with our sculpt brush here and maybe start to subtract a little bit from a different angle, to kind of clearly see what we're doing. Because the problem with the move brush sometimes it's a little too indiscriminate and it's going to start pulling on other structures perhaps that you don't want to do, or perhaps sometimes in the process of changing the size of something or the placement of a particular volume, you actually need to change the expression of that volume beyond just moving it in or out there. So that's why sometimes I would actually rather work here on a separate view here and actually see better what I'm doing. Here it kind of allows me to make sure that I am always keeping a little bit of that shape here to sternocleidomastoid, so that even though I am reducing its size, I'm not losing its nice kind of 3D volume that is right there. Let's pull out a little bit here of the bottom here of the neck where the trapezius would be. She has some really nicely defined trapezius. And take a look at that. Our neck is exactly where it needs to be, and our highlight looks exactly the same. Now the jaw, though, you can see that my jaw now is a little bit too far down. And, that is the reason of pulling the jaw back, because from this angle here, it looked like the jaw was still a little bit too far forward here. But we can see here there's a deeper shadow here that we can see on the reference than what we are getting. So we definitely need to carve in here a little bit more the shape of the jaw. And definitely here, there's a little bit too much mass that we can also see. So I like when two views here tell us the same story and point to the same kind of changes that need to happen here. That's always nice. So let's go ahead here and start by just defining a little bit more the shape of the jaw here, the back of the jaw. And we can also carve out a little bit here from under the jaw. So have a little bit of room. A little bit more. One thing I need to do here is to move the ear up. My ear is way too far down, so let's do that. And there's also a lot of the anatomy of the ear here is actually a little bit different than what it should be. So it's not just about moving the ear up, but we'll also have to fix a lot of the anatomy of the ear afterward. But we'll do that later. It's less of a priority for now, as much as just getting the placement of it to be where it needs to be here. What about here? Oh yeah, we had mentioned we needed to flatten out the front a little bit. This is getting very dirty, but that's okay. It's always big to small, right? It's the big shapes are not there, not placed where they need to be. There's no sense in worrying about the smaller details. All right, forehead, we want to pull this out here a little bit. We've been talking enough about those frontal eminences. It's going to be better here if I can see where the albedo is, because we needed and we wanted to pull out from this particular angle here, right in front of the hairline. All right, look at that. So the highlight on the neck, the highlight on the shape of the jaw here matches pretty well. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. There's some clear changes here that needs to happen to the shape of the eyes, the nose, these sorts of things. You can see that, the more that we stare at this, the more that we start to spot some very minor differences there that start to bother us more and more here. It is worth to mention right now, though, that there is a danger in doing this kind of exercise for too long. Like I've talked in the past about the fact that I'm actually not that big of a fan of overlaying pictures and just sculpting based upon that. And it just turns out that this is exactly what we're doing right now. All these references that we have, they're not actually placed 100% the way that they need to be. I was very careful to try and match the exact field of view within my viewport as what we have on our references, try to match that as close as we can. But they will never be 100% there. So there will always be minor differences between the position of the model, the 3D model versus the references. And if we are too attached, I suppose, to fixing every little minor differences that we could spot here, let's say in terms of the silhouette here. Considering the fact that these are always imperfectly matching in terms of position, in terms of orientation, we may get lost in that and we just never see the end of it, really. So yeah, so ultimately, you want to get close. You want to look at those references the way that we're doing right now and do this kind of quad view setup. See what kind of information it kind of gives you that is interesting, that is actionable. But beyond that, don't get stuck on this forever either, because you will never see the end of it there. We always want to keep that in mind, like that kind of idea of good enough here. And ultimately, what is the most important thing is our 3D view that is right here. So Let's now take a look at her eyes. Eyes are obviously the most important part of the face. And so it's important for me to really get those right and to get those to be as close as possible to our references there. Now, it is a bit of a challenge here to find a particular reference where her eyes are completely neutral because, of course, this is all taken from movies, so she's always having a bit of a facial expression there. But we have a few here that I think can be useful here. So these are pretty good. She's got a bit of I'm not sure if this is a smirk going on, but I feel as if there's a little bit of an expression here. These eyes are not completely neutral. These look more neutral to me. Okay, obviously, her eyes don't look the same. Her right eye and her left eye doesn't look the same, so we have to treat them separately. Her left eye just seems to be a little bit lazy-like if we kind of look at this one here. I actually kind of like this one. You can kind of tell here too a little bit that her left eye is just a little bit lazier. You can kind of tell because of the distance between the pupil and the top here of the eyelid there. You can see that here it's a little bit lower. Now, the question, of course, that goes through my mind at this point is even beyond the idea that her eyes, she's got a bit of a lazy eye there, which is definitely part of the essence of her face, by the way. We definitely need to capture that for sure. The thing I'm also curious about is whether her eyes are at the same height. It's hard to really make out one eye being higher than the other one. They do seem to be at the same height. I'm kind of looking here at this little point here for the medial canthal tendon here, and it seems to be at the same height, controlling for the mouth also being completely straight here. So in fact, it does strike me as if this eyeball is just a millimeter under this one. Okay, let's just go to town on this. We just gotta take the move brush or the grab brush and just go to town and feel our way to the perfect placement for these eyes here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just start by just moving those down here by just a millimeter. It also seems to me as if this eye is actually further towards the outside, and this one here, this one looks like it's slightly closer to her midline there. There's some type of structural asymmetry that's kind of going on there. I guess I will disregard that for now, but definitely there is some asymmetry to the primary shapes of her face there. Okay, so I want to take this in. I want to move it down just ever so slightly, just a very, very tiny amount there. Just like that. It's almost imperceptible. Then let's take the grab brush here and let's just go to town on these particular eyelids. Let's see how close we can get them. We've also talked about the fact that this is not perfectly round, of course. There's just a little bit of a flat section here. So let me just pull this down here a little bit. Let's grab the pinch brush and try to tighten up a little bit the inside corner of the eye here. And it does strike me like this part here, which I like to refer to as the meat of the eye, definitely needs to be smaller on both sides, really. And there's a slight bump to it too. You can see there's actually a bit of a break here. So we have here the border of the upper eyelid. There's a bit of a break there, and then there's a bit of a convexity like that. So kind of want to, I guess, do something a little bit more like this here. Okay, it's already a little bit closer. I think I overdid the laziness there. Ultimately, it's actually less that I have overdone the laziness here, and it's more that this eye is not lazy enough. There's always two solutions, usually, to most problems. I could either make this eye a little bit less lazy, or I could actually make this one lazier. So there's usually more than one solution to the problems that we have. And in this case here, it's actually the better solution to bring this eye down, or bring this eyelid down a little bit, actually. It's a better solution. As I've alluded to a few times before, this particular crease here, that is for the under eyelid there, so right under the tarsal plate. I need to make that deeper. The way that the light reacts with the surface right now, it's not describing a crease that is deep enough for my taste. I mean, you're not really going to be able to tell too much from this particular reference here, so we may actually want to look for a different one. This is a really good one, actually. This is a profile here. We can actually compare what's kind of going on here. It's kind of, I mean, it's kind of similar. Okay. We're really not all that far, but I do feel as if I was to look at this particular line here, this is a little bit more at a diagonal than what I currently have. So we need to just go in there and just carve out a little bit, a very, very tiny amount from the surface, and I believe we'll be pretty good. Just go ahead here. Let's just do a little bit of carving. While I'm there, let me actually carve out a little bit of this side here as well. Okay, and then let's switch over to our fill brush. Just going to flatten out the whole surface. There you go. Look at that. No need to use smooth brush, and we're still getting very nice, very smooth result. And we're preserving that nice harsh crease. You know, that's always a problem with using smooth brush. You lose definition when you actually want to preserve it in different places. This is a bit awkward. We can fix that right now. Let's take our clay strips again. Let me just push this in here a little bit. And then let's switch back over to our fill brush. Let's fill this in. Make sure this place here looks nice and convex. Right now it feels a little bit concave. Let me just pull this out here a little bit. There we go. It's looking better. Smooth out here on the underside of the eye. I'm saying smoothing, but yet again, I'm still using my my fill brush here. I could go over this here with the fill brush a little bit, as you can see, and it does blur out. Well, it doesn't blur out, but it does reduce a little bit of contrast here for that crease there. It just makes it a little bit more gentle, but it keeps it hard, which is the nice thing. Could also take the move brush here and move this crease around a little bit, although I want to be careful here. The move brush is always a little bit tricky when it comes to moving creases like these, because there's also a chance that you're going to wind up having a result that is very wobbly. That's just true of using move brush in general, to be honest. It does have a tendency to often lead to some wobbliness over a surface in different places. Okay, so those creases are a little bit deeper. Because I'm so zoomed in right now, it actually makes it hard to judge whether the depth of it is perfect or if it's a little bit too much, but we'll definitely reevaluate that regularly here. Okay, I don't want to let the eyes go. I have said that what we would do for this particular third pass would be to try to develop a bit of a tunnel vision, which is something that we usually avoid on the first and second passes over this particular head, because we want to be constantly moving around the surface. We want to be changing everything and improving everything all at once. But when we're doing this kind of third pass here, it's okay to start to develop a bit of a tunnel vision for different features and really concentrate on really getting the minute details of them perfectly, because we're at the point where we really have to be detail-oriented, detail-minded, and really kind of think through very carefully every little crease, every little bump. So it's okay at this stage here to perhaps stick with the eyes here a little bit. This is actually a pretty good reference. Once again, to look at the shape of the eyes here, the shape of the eyelids. Let's see what's kind of going on here that we can kind of spot. The lighting's coming from under. So I could just maybe go for this particular kind of lighting setup in this particular case. I may want to overlay my reference, one of my references. Let's actually do that. I think that sounds like a good idea here. So let's actually do that. I know this particular reference here has a pretty high focal length, so let's increase that here. Right, or my FOV is still too high. Or too low. Let's bring this higher. All right, I think this is as good as I'm going to get this particular reference. Yeah, you can see how many little differences there are here. One thing that's very clear, though, looking at this particular blend here, is the nose. You can see how deviated her nose is actually to the side here. If you kind of take a look at this here. As I go, like my nose here is still symmetrical, and you can see that it's definitely needs to be pushed off to the side here a little bit. Also the eyes here, right? You can see that both my eyebrows need to be raised a little bit. Position of the eyes is fine. She is looking ever so slightly to the side. She's not looking straight. She's like looking at something that's just right next to the camera. She's not looking straight into the camera. So I think it's okay that these two eyes don't fully 100% match. It's okay for the jaw not to match because her jaw is slightly open. So that's okay too. And for the ears, well, you can see there's a slight difference here. I'm not going to try to bother to try to match the ears, I don't think. But I will definitely try to match everything else here. Like her cranium probably also needs to be slightly wider, as you can see near the front. Okay, so that's a lot of little changes there. Obviously, I started doing this because I actually wanted to just concentrate on the eyes here, but this is always kind of the problem in a way. When you start looking at these things, it's like you start finding a whole lot of things left and right that needs to be addressed, and then you're like, okay, well, do I do it now? Do I do it later? Yeah, I kind of want to do most of these things now. So actually, I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to keep this on the side here. So let me go here to duplicate area. Into new window. I'm going to keep this on this side on my second monitor. And I'm going to move my PureRef over there too. And we're just going to keep referencing that. Okay, so as we said, a lot of things that we can spot. I do want to concentrate mostly on the eyes, but it feels like there's a few low-hanging fruits here that we can address at the same time. So on my main monitor, then I will just continue working on this. And I will simply look back to my second screen that has my reference on it once in a while to compare changes that I am doing. It wouldn't be a bad idea for me to actually keep a duplicate of my PureRef window as well. So let me go ahead and duplicate PureRef. Keep this on my main screen. Maybe you want to look at another reference. Let's start with the nose, okay? I kind of want to address the nose and the slight kind of asymmetry that's there that we can actually see. So let me go ahead here and just start carving out here a little bit on this side here. Makes you wonder, like, so call that a deviated septum when the middle of the nose like this is kind of offset to one side. Kind of makes you wonder what happened for her septum to be deviated like that, because that often happens. Someone like breaks their nose. Something like that may actually happen in those particular cases. Someone's going to break their nose and then it's going to heal, but slightly off to the side there. So it looks like something happened to her nose. I mean, it's obviously possible that this is just naturally how her nose is, but usually this is often a result of an accident somehow. Maybe she broke her nose while she was younger, and that's the reason why her septum is slightly deviated. Who knows? I'm just speculating here in this particular case. Now, the big issue here that I really want to take a look at is this particular curve here. So as I am subtracting, and could even take the grab brush here, I could just move this off slightly to the side there. In fact, before I do bring in other references, let's go back to our second screen. Let's see how this actually looks here. I see, so it's kind of where it needs to be. Although it does look like also the ball of the nose is also slightly deviated here. So it's not just a question of carving out, but it's also a question of taking this here and moving it off to the side here a little bit. Because of course now the danger is that this particular curve here is going to start to look very, very steep under certain angles. So I don't want to overdo that. So once we know that the septum is where it needs to be from front view. This is a very tiring bug, by the way. This may happen to you when you switch windows and you come back to Blender afterward. This actually happens to me in ZBrush too, so it's a Wacom issue at this particular point. But sometimes you lose pen pressure when you go to another application or perhaps click on another window. I'm not sure where the trigger is exactly, and then you come back afterward to Blender and you just kind of see that your pen pressure is kind of disappeared. When that's the case here, what I do is that I just quickly switch to a different window. I just essentially Alt tab to something else, whatever's going to be the next application, and then I Alt tab back to Blender, and that always fixes the problem. But that's a problem that's also common in ZBrush, in fact. So it's not not a Blender related issue. It's just say Wacom related issue at this particular point. Okay, so as we said, first of all, let's just place it where it needs to be here. Okay, so we can see there's a bit of a line here too. So this is the this would be probably the line of the nasal bone here. Mine's a little bit too strong. You can see I can kind of tone it down here a little bit. But the ball of the nose mostly seems to be where it needs to be, although I have a little bit too much mass here. So let's go ahead and subtract that. Let me subtract a little bit of mass here from the ball of the nose. And as we said, okay, so this particular crease here is where it needs to be, but it's a little too strong right now. So let me, using the clay strips brush here yet again, let me actually move this so you can see which brush is selected. Although I suppose you could see it within the tools here too. I just want to reduce a little bit here, the volume here that we can see from the nasal bone that is right here. Just to reduce a little bit the contrast that we could perceive. Okay, so to our second screen once again. Yeah, okay, so everything is where it needs to be. Now we really need to look at this nose from other angles to really validate that the curve here that I'm getting is, the silhouette that I'm getting is what it needs to be. So yeah, you can see there's definitely a concavity here. This nasal bone is still definitely too strong because from this angle, we can appreciate a little bit of that concavity that we expect to see because of that deviated septum, but we're not seeing the brow bone on the or the nasal bone on the other side as much, or at least it's not really clear. The lighting could play a factor here, of course. So I don't want to reduce this too much, but I do want to reduce it here a little bit. Let's check that everything is still where it needs to be here. I haven't moved that particular crease at the base of the nasal bone. I have not. You can see here, this looks pretty good. There's a bit of a crease that we can perceive here. So right on top of the alar cartilage. So I need to shape this better here to really, so that we can really clearly see the definition of the top of the alar cartilage. I need to just pull this out here a little bit here. On the other side, we can't really, there's a bit of a concavity here, is a little bit of a trough perhaps, if you look at my cursor right now. So let me just fill that up because I can't actually clearly see that, at least not from this particular reference. In fact, let me just see on other references. Yeah, this kind of trough that I have right now, I'm not sure we can really feel it. So let me just take my grab brush here, I'll just fill up this little trough that is here. Can clearly see the deviation in her nose, by the way, from this particular angle here. It's very, very obvious. Also, there's interesting subtleties here. There's a bit of a flat angle that we can spot here on her nostrils. I'm not really there. Can probably fix that just through the grab brush, hopefully. It's one of those, nostrils is one of those pet peeves, I suppose. That we can have, like ears. I know some people who do character art, I won't name them, who have pet peeve on ears because ears are often neglected by people who do character art, especially the back of ears. And so some people like, this is something that really annoys them when you know how an ear should be formed, especially the back of an ear. So nostrils can be a little bit of that too. Can be a little bit of a pet peeve for some people where it's not really looking right, but it's just part of a character that we often neglect. Her nose does not look to be as deep as what I have. I mean, obviously this is always by reading highlights and stuff, but clearly there are differences here that need to be addressed. I suppose I wanted to look at the eyes, but now we are actually looking at the nose more than anything else. And that's fine. Let's try to do some meaningful work here. We'll come back on the eyes afterward. Okay. Yeah, I see major differences here with the nose. This is very interesting. But I don't quite have the answer right now as to how to go about fixing that. So we need to solve this. Okay. Clearly, when we look at the highlight here, so I'm following this particular highlight, okay? The light is kind of coming from front. I can see where the light is by looking at the highlight within her eyes, sorry. So the highlight is coming from front right now, which means that anything that is kind of highlighted, I suppose, or it has a specular highlight on it, is also kind of facing straight ahead. So that's great because that really gives me a very clear sense of where the break is here. And so if we take a look at the shape of the highlight right now, we definitely do not have the same highlight. You can see that from where the highlight is to the nostril right now, this is way too big. This needs to be narrowed down. So there's a lot of little changes here that actually need to happen. This is actually very quite an in-depth change. I think that needs to happen here. Let me actually see if I have. I see I can kind of get myself one of these lights to be more or less with the same orientation as what I can perceive here. You can see my light is already positioned in such a way that it is more or less coming straight ahead. So I can compare the highlight here as well. Yeah, some big changes that need to happen here to the nose. Very big changes. This may take some time. With the standard brush here, I can just try to push this highlight, like try to pull the surface out here and then push it in here a little bit just to move the highlight so that it's a bit higher. Ideally, I would do this on both sides individually, or rather I would use references of each side individually. And now I'm just going to generalize what the other side should look like. Okay, I can probably bring this highlight down with the standard brush here and just pull out here a little bit. It's going to sharpen up a little bit the tip of the nose there. We've talked a few times about the fact that the nose is actually very hard to get to look nice if you don't use a smooth brush because of how round it is. You know, like if we just use the our fill brush here, we will flatten zones perhaps a little bit too much. So definitely a great place here just to smooth because we want to keep that round appearance as we are smoothing, of course, or polishing the surface rather. So definitely cool to smooth this zone out here a little bit. Okay, how's this highlight looking? While I'm there, why don't I smooth out here the crease at the bottom of the nose, at the bottom of the nostril, because I feel as if this is way too strong. It's a pretty legit place here too to use the smooth brush. You can see here where the alar cartilage stops. The top border of the alar cartilage needs to be pulled back here quite a lot. My alar cartilage right now is way too far in the front. Okay, we need to do that on both sides. Let's double check with our second screen reference here. Okay. Okay, this is way too offset from the center now. In fact, the little piece here that I've pushed inward here, I think this is too much. Let me pull this down here. can see getting the subtleties of all these little highlights here on the tip of the nose, getting them placed exactly at the proper location. This is very, very, very tricky to get right. You gotta go very, very subtly here. Just using my clay strips, but I'm just very gently pushing in the surface, pulling out the surface, trying to get those planes here to be at the exact same position. It's extremely hard, but by doing it very, very slowly, we will eventually get them to be exactly where we want them to be. The shape of my nostrils here still isn't quite right. You can see this is drooping down a little bit too much. We could try to grab brush. There is a chance that we'll completely destroy some of those planes that we've been building, but maybe if I just pull this up here a little bit, it's gonna be fine. Phew, okay. Well, that's better. We're not aiming for 100%, right? We're aiming for 95, so I think this is good enough. Now, in fact, let's compare those highlights again. Yeah, you can see where the highlight is now. It's a lot closer than what we have in our reference. I still can spot some minor differences in terms of the shape of the nostrils here. This becomes very, very subtle. So I think we can probably disregard that for now, unless other views kind of tell us otherwise. But I do want to do what I was doing before, which was to once again just compare with other references here from this particular 3/4 here. I really want to get the curve of the nose down here. So there should be a little bit of a bump here that we can spot if we can find a 3/4 from this particular angle. So hopefully we can find that bump. Oh, this is a good one. Yeah, so we can see where the highlight is here, where it stops. It's kind of more or less the same spot, right? I think this is good enough. I'm looking at the highlight here, the way the light reacts to the surface. Yeah, I think this is good enough. So coming back to this image here, because really ultimately what I wanted to do at first was to look at the eyes, in fact. And then we just started spotting so many other different things that were kind of interesting to try to address there. And there still are some of those things. So the nose is closer. As we said, is it 100%? Well, no, it's 95%. Yeah, I think we can call it that. In fact, let me address everything. So we can also take a look at the where the hairline is. You can see I could make the skull a bit wider. Not the skull itself. Rather, I don't want to touch the back of the skull, but I just want to make just the temples perhaps slightly wider than what they currently are. Can definitely just pull the temples out here a little bit. It's interesting that her eyelids, if we take a look at where the crease is right now, some definite differences there. It's almost as if her brow bone on the sides is thicker than what I currently have, because we can see that the eyebrows are all pushed towards the outside. That's interesting. I want to be wary of touching that zone too much, but I do want to address that if there's something that needs to be addressed. So let's once again compare with other images here. It does strike me as if her cheekbones need to be sticking out more. Absolutely. Okay, it's probably a change I could do symmetrically as well. So this feels like one of those symmetrical changes because this is very structural to the primary volumes of the face and also very, very subtle. I could definitely, if I'm looking at how much thickness we can see here, this angle is pretty much the same. I can definitely pull out the brow bone a little bit. Absolutely. Okay, I'll do this one asymmetrically. Actually, this is one of those perhaps great moments to use a split screen here. And the reason why I want to do a split screen is because I want to be looking at this particular angle, but I don't want to be sculpting from this particular angle. Yeah, I'm keeping this reference on the other monitor, but I'm more or less just going to try to match this particular zone here. Because what I want to be doing is sculpting from this particular angle here, because I want to really feel the brow bone here. I don't want to just take a move brush and just randomly kind of try to grab this particular zone. I want to be very careful and actually sculpt from this particular angle while I'm looking at the feedback here. Cheekbones need to be even wider than that. In this case, I need to pull the cheekbones, but actually pretty far back. You know, like if I just use a move brush here, I'm going to be pulling out the front here of the cheekbones from this particular angle. If I use a move brush in this particular case, or the grab brush, sorry, I keep using those ZBrush terms there. I'm going to pull out the front here of the cheekbones, which is actually not what I want, because I want to be pulling out the point further back, as you can see. So in this particular case, it makes sense to pull out further back. See the kind of effect it gives here? Here, I need to move the screen so that we don't actually see the ear, because we can't see it here. So this is about right. This little bump here. I mean, there's a little bit of a bump there. That's the temporal line at that point. So I think that's fine. I mean, obviously she has hair here, so kind of changes a little bit how this looks here. But yeah, there's a bit of a bump here, which I have here. Maybe it's not as steep as what I currently have. Let me use symmetry here. Let me just pull this out here a little bit. There we go. Okay, and as we've said, now we need to fix the other side. Because there too, if I look at my reference, I can see that you can see what I've been doing here. So I've been pulling out here the brow bone essentially on the side there. You can see there's a bit of a convexity here that we can see. So this is the change that I've been doing, but I need to do it symmetrically. So I need to do pretty much the exact same thing. I could just go here and just quickly sculpt that in, but there too, I think I want to bring in a reference from the other side. Okay, I really don't want to overdo the cheekbones. It could be very easy to push that too far. So let's just keep it like this. I mean, this feels pretty close. Here too, I could actually pull this out here a little bit. Oh, this one's pretty good here. I like this one. Yeah, same thing. Because of the eyelash, it looks like there's a little bit less skin here than what there actually is. But if we look at where the eye crease is, from the distance between the eye crease and the silhouette, it needs to be wider. That's a lot better. I feel as if there still is room here to perhaps take the standard brush and just add a little bit more, yet a little bit more volume to those brow bones. Let me do it symmetrically because I want it on both sides here. So just very, very low intensity, very light pressure here. I just want to build a little bit more volume here. It's almost imperceptible unless I do Control Z here. The reason why I'm doing that is just because on this angle here, you can see that well, I'm just looking where the brow bone is, where I can kind of see here the sides of the brow bone. I'm kind of trying to read the light here and trying to match that. I have too much concavity here. So with the fill brush, I can just fill this up here, try to get rid of a little bit of that concavity that is there. And as we've seen, definitely the hairline also needs to be brought out. So with the grab brush here, I'll do it symmetrically here too. I'll just pull out here. More or less at the, you can kind of see where I'm pulling here. It's really far back, almost at the level of the ears. So I have an almost perfect match here for the hairline on the left side of her face. On the right side, it's not quite matching, but so is the ear. You can see the ear is also a little bit out, so maybe it's either the angle of the camera. It's a little bit different. Perhaps here I can just rotate ever so slightly the model, just like that. Yeah, good enough. 95%. About the placement of those eyebrows, I can probably address that right now. Feels like I just need to paint them a little bit higher. Because I think the shape of the brow bone is good. At least it's good enough. It's always subtle, right? But it's okay. It's okay to be detail-minded in this particular case. Let me just pull out here the concavity here. The temporal fossa. Let me pull that out a little bit more. Just a little bit. A very, very small amount. Okay. Yeah, for the rest, let's paint that in. Let's paint the eyebrows. Yeah, if you look at this this camera here, right? We're definitely a lot closer. Like the likeness is definitely starting to come through here, and we've mostly just been working around the eyes, you know. But we can definitely see a lot more of the essence of the face that is starting to come through here. One thing I want to address here is I can see a little bit of a concavity here. If you take a look here, you can see this is convex, 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 convex. This is concave here. I'm not really seeing that concavity here. I can see the shape of the skull though here, right? So we have our temporal line that is here. Here we have the brow bone. This is the side here of the brow bone. I have this here. You can see there's a bit of a convexity here to the brow bone. I have this nice same kind of angle here that is really nice. It's just this little fossa here is just a little bit too strong. Let me just pull this out here. So actually fill brush would probably be the best in this particular case. Let's just fill this up. Let's get rid of that concavity. So let's move those eyebrows slightly higher. Let's now get rid of it's a little bit of sculpting too that kind of happened. I mean, I can preserve that, it's fine, but we definitely need to move it because right now it is not where it needs to be there, as you can see. So let's just get rid of that here. All right, let's take a look at the shape of those eyelids. You can see both the left and the right one need to be, the crease needs to be raised a little bit. My crease is a little too low in both cases. So let's go ahead and do that. This is a bit of a tricky one because using the move brush here really isn't all that ideal because, I mean, I guess I could do it here. It's little strokes like these. In fact, well, the move brush, the grab brush may actually be the better solution here, but I think I need to mask first. Let's do a little bit of masking. So with our mask brush then, what we're going to do is we're just going to paint here a little bit of a mask here on the upper eyelid. I don't want to hit the crease. I want to keep this so that it is only, you can see on the lower border of the upper eyelid. And we're going to do that on both sides. We're going to do both of these eyes individually here. So I'm just painting a mask here so that we can use the grab brush, but we're going to use a grab brush of a somewhat big radius, and I don't want to move what I am masking right now. So it should be, I think it should be pretty good. Let me, in fact, it'd be better if I didn't have the color visible here so that I can clearly see where the mask is. Okay, so this is pretty good. Maybe we could blur this once. Just do a blur mask here. So smooth mask. Maybe that's too much. Okay, let's just use our grab brush. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, see, so this allows us to use a bigger brush on our grab brush, bigger radius, should I say? Okay, so let's move this up here. Where are we now? It's tempting to do this change directly in this particular viewport, but I'm always trying to resist doing that. Okay. I like this little angle change right here. It's very beautiful. We can push this in here deeper. This thing that I forget the name. There's a Plica semilunaris in this particular zone. Although it's like the smallest little sliver of meat that you have on the inside there. This part here, I've kind of forgot the name. I know some people call it the caruncles. I just never know how scientific that is. But we can call it the caruncles here. That's fine. We pull it in a little bit more. Wouldn't be a bad place here to use a draw sharp brush. All right, should be good enough. Let's look at the other eye. Let's do the same thing. In fact, let's start by masking the lower border of the upper eyelid. Let's paint our mask here once again. Starting to think a lasso wouldn't be a bad idea either. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good. All the work I've been doing with this zone here now looks way too improper. You can see how strong this particular shadow is right now. You can see that. Yeah, this whole zone here is way too big. Let's use our clay strips. Let's just fill this in here a little bit. I suspect on the other side too, it's a little too strong. Let's just fill this up here. Ooh, there's a bit of a concavity here. There's a convexity behind that. Oh, I'm not sure about that here. I don't hate it either. Okay, let me just fill this up here a little bit and then flatten it behind. Okay, I've addressed a lot of the problems that we could spot within this reference here. 95%, right? So I think it's time that we moved on to a different reference. Start looking at other things, perhaps. The ears, I'm probably not going to bother trying to match them 100% because it would take some time. So I'm probably going to accept that the ears are not going to be 100% the same. I mean, I'll do the changes that I can spot here. So you can see there's a bit of a little bump there. Why don't we just go in here and just add that in there, right? Why not? So I'll do some of the changes that I can spot, but ears are, it's okay if they're not really completely there because most people aren't really good enough to be able to judge that anyway. So we'll just disregard the differences there. Most of the differences that we can spot when we look at a reference directly next to the model that we have. All right, just got a bit of a bump like that. All right, one thing I really want to look at is the fat within her cheeks. I was gonna say her face, which is definitely what I want to be looking at. But I want to be looking at the fat because here, if I look here, you can see there's a little bit of a bump here from the nasolabial fat that we have here with the malar fat that's behind it. I don't see it here, right? We can definitely see the nasolabial fold that's right here, but the nasolabial fat, we don't really feel its volume right at the junction where it meets the nostrils, but I do have that on my model, and it's starting to make her look a little, perhaps a little bit older because of that. So I definitely want to flatten this out here. Blur this here a little bit. Well, not blur. Still using my felt brush, but you know what I mean. Blend it, I suppose. Okay, that's already a little bit better. Perhaps I can flatten this zone here. Could still be too much. I mean, the light is coming from this angle here. Why don't we start polishing too a little bit? I'm just going to polish the zones that are starting to bother me a little bit, because like if we take a look at the cheeks here, you can see how nice, smooth, how round this is, and the fact that we still feel a lot of those brush strokes here. Starting to throw me off of here a little bit. Like we were saying when we had finished our albedo pass here, like the we're definitely getting to the point where the having a surface that is unpolished does start to become bothersome, which I actually like. It means that we're doing a good job. Like if that is starting to be the thing that starts to bother us, it means that the bigger major things have been addressed. That's how I interpret that. So for me, that's really, really cool. But yeah, definitely start to just polish here a few of those volumes left and right when they start to jump up here a little bit. So let's polish this here a little bit. You can see how the cheeks are definitely looking more like our reference now. Okay, so this here. And of course, I want to keep the this light kind of, you can see how the light reacts here. We have this kind of oval shape here. I want to keep that, of course. I want to make sure that we have a somewhat similar shape that is here. So this is either shadow or what's happening here. So I feel as if this should maybe not be as sharp here. Let's use our fill brush. Let's just flatten this out here a little bit. Try to get something a bit rounded there. Yeah, better. Okay, what about the other side? That's a bit of a tricky one to match in terms of lighting, but it's actually kind of worth to maybe do so. Let me actually save this. Let me try to match the lighting in this particular camera angle, because there's some interesting things happening here with her orbital fat that I think we haven't really talked to or looked at too much here, but there's definitely some very interesting kind of shapes here that are starting to appear in her orbital fat zone here. So yeah, let me spend a little bit of time on the lighting here. So we have one light here that is coming from behind and over. Let me see with my turntable if I can get a light in this particular orientation. It may be hard. And then we have another light that is coming more or less from the top here. Okay, so I think we need to move these lights individually. Okay, so we have one light coming from the top. And then we have another light coming as a rim light somewhere perhaps about here or so. Yeah, see, we're starting to get that little shape here that is starting to be visible here. So if I want to match this exactly, which I think is a good idea here. So this needs to be a bit stronger. I want to catch a little bit of highlight on the lips here. So yeah, see, we're starting to get some of that orbital fat that we can read, and we definitely don't have the same shapes here. So here I can see a little bit of what looks to me like a concave line. Here I have a bit of a convex line. So that's a pretty major difference. Interesting. Okay, but this light is pretty much where it needs to be. If I look at the way that the light looks like on the lips, I think this is good enough. Yeah, you can see that it's also cutting at the fill trim in the same place. So that's cool. Okay, so this other light that was here, this is our key light, I suppose. Let me just make it a bit stronger. It's about like that. Perhaps it needs to be raised a little bit. Yeah, it's about here. We don't have I don't have a lot of ambient in this scene, which is why we're getting those deep shadows that are there. Okay. Yeah, see, this starting to match in terms of lighting. And then we have a rim light. I'm gonna forget about it. Oh hell, let me just copy a light over. Okay, and color is not the same, but that's fine. All right. Yeah. Major difference. The shape of the orbital fat there. So first of all, the shape of the light that is coming from kind of the back here, the kind of strong light that is here. If I'm looking at the shape here, the shape that it's kind of carving here, I have a convex line, which is what I have here too. So that's okay. This line should not change. What should change is where the other line is under that here. So I have a very tiny shadow that you can see here. So here we have, this is kind of creating a bit of an almond shape. Whereas right now these two lines are kind of parallel in my case. So yeah, interesting, right? So this isn't something I can fix with the move brush. So I guess we just need to go to town. I'll sculpt from this angle directly in this particular case because I want to try and try to get the exact same shadow going on in both cases here. So is this working? Let me see here. So here we go. It's probably a pretty good case here for another one of those split screen effects. So while we have this here, I'll sculpt from this particular angle or this particular viewport here. Let's go. Let's push this in. Yeah, I can see we're starting to get that nice almond shape here that we're looking for. Okay. Closer. Closer. Pretty cool, right? Now I have a straight line, still need a concave line. We're not there yet, we still need to push this in. %95. Maybe some few changes I can do to the zone here to the glabella too, because it's a bit of a reminder, this little shadow that is here is kind of shaped like a hook. That's a reminder of when I was trying to give her a bit of a frown. Yeah, you can see that depression that is here. So let's just get rid of that. I'm just great place to use a grab brush here. Let's just pull this out. All right. Of course, the changes I have done to the orbital fat zone, all this needs to be propagated to the other side. Let me just smooth this out here. Let me see if I can. Smooth brush may even be too strong. That's okay here. Yeah, so I need to obviously propagate these changes to the other side. Once again, maybe I could have done these symmetrically, but once again, I simply like how lifelike it makes the model look when you do things asymmetrically, which is kind of why I have a tendency to privilege that as much as possible. So, okay, so we need to do the changes that we have done pretty much on the other side. Means, yeah, you can see how much more volume there is right now on this side versus this one here. So I guess let's just go to town. Let's just take our draw brush, our clay strips here. So mostly need to push this in. Could also pull this out here a little bit. We'll also bring another reference from the other side because I do want to read these all this orbital fat here properly. But I can probably get very close to where I was just by doing a few changes here that are relatively quick. We did also do some changes here to nasolabial fat and the nasolabial fold. So let me also do that here. My fill brush, let me just fill up here a little bit of that crease that we have. All right, so first I'm just doing the changes the way that I have done them on the other side. I'm just sculpting the same thing, and then let's bring in a reference right after this to compare those changes. I mean, obviously, we could maybe kind of compare with this one here to begin with, because we did, I think my lighting has moved again, though. Yeah, okay. Let's just bring in another reference from the other side. Oh, this one's pretty good. Kind of like the lighting that we have here. We can use this one. She's kind of sweaty in this one. Okay, first of all, we don't see this as much. So maybe I can just tone it down here a little bit. I also want to keep the bump that's there, but maybe I can just reduce it here a little bit, just like that. Same thing here, reduce this here just a little bit. Okay, now there is also the medial bundle of the palpebral portion of orbicularis oculi. I believe I got that one right, which is this little thing that is right here, which is this little thing that kind of sticks out here. Is there's a very, very small volume that kind of sticks out, which is a very obscure anatomical thing. So we need a little bit of a visible bump there. It's so subtle, but we can probably get that right here. So let's use our clay strips. Let me see if I can raise this here just an ever so slight amount. Let's see if I can just add a little bit of a raise here. Yeah, just like that. A little bit more. This is too strong. Let's blend that in. Let me just smooth it out here. This little crease that is here, too strong. For the medial bundle, what I've been raising here, maybe I could have gone at that using the basic draw brush. It would not have been a bad thing either. We're not seeing this here as much as what I have. Let me just blend that in. This orbital fat sticks out too much. Power draw brush, let's just push this in here very slightly. This little bump should be there. Let me smooth that out. Yeah, we don't feel as much of that orbital fat here, right? It's like it sticks out more on her left side than it does on her right side. So unless another reference tells me otherwise, I don't want to feel as much that little almond that we were sculpting before on the other side. I don't want to feel it here as much. I don't want to feel as if the orbital fat is herniating out as much. Looking at a highlight, we can see a highlight here, and I feel as if there's a bit of a, if I look at the shadow here, the way the shadow is kind of sculpting the side here. Yeah, we can enhance that a little bit. Let's use our draw brush. I'm just going to push this in here just ever so slightly. I'm going to pull here out a little bit more. Just want to simplify the shape of this shadow here so that it matches more what is happening here. Okay, let's also start to, I'm going to call this polish, but it's not really polished, but I'm just trying to here get rid here. There's a little bit of a sharp edge here that you can see that we don't see here. So I'll just flatten this out here and blend that shadow a little bit better. One thing that's beautiful in this picture here that we haven't really talked about too much, and we've more or less been ignoring, is the chin, in fact. But you can see where the highlight is here. So we have a nice angle change that is happening where the highlight is here. So we have a plane here, which is kind of more or less pointing towards the top. Then we have an angle change that's right here, and we have that cleft that is appearing right under that. I kind of want to make that a little bit more obvious here. So let me just go here with the standard draw brush. pull out just a little bit here, the top here of our mental trigon. And then afterward, let's push in a little bit the cleft. Yeah, see, just like that. It's a little bit more on point. So are we 95% yet? Let's say 93%. So that's after a few hours, which was enough time to go from 0 to 80% during our first pass there. And the third pass should definitely take longer because we're working on all these little details left and right, and we're really trying to be very, very careful about the shape that we're giving things. So obviously, like, it's normal for the third pass to take quite a long time. It should in fact take longer. It should in fact take longer than the other passes because of how many little details there are and all the subtleties within those little shapes, left and right there. It just takes time, you know. You just have to throw time at it. But yeah, you can see how close we're getting this likeness so far. I'm definitely feeling Emily Blunt. Like, this is clearly her now. There's really no doubt anymore. We can perhaps start a little bit of the polish pass here. It wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea to do that here, because I think once we're done with the polish pass, I think we will probably also maybe it's going to change our perception of things, but I also want to talk about it before too long. It doesn't mean that I'll necessarily stop working on this right after the polish pass, but I want to show you how to do it. And I think this class has been going on for long enough before we get to that. So let's talk about it. I mean, there's really nothing all that special about the actual proper polish pass. It's really just taking the brushes we've been using so far and just getting rid of a lot of those little imperfections that we have over the surface there, just getting something more polished. We don't necessarily, yet again, want to go over this with a huge smooth brush. Well, I suppose it is one of the worst things that you could do, but, like, if you got this far without doing smoothing, you could, using smooth here at this stage and just going over the surface like this, it's not the worst thing. So if you're pressed for time, just doing like a huge smooth, you can kind of get away with it. I just don't really like it as an option, and definitely want to spend a little bit, if we can spend a little bit more time on this, then that's what we definitely want to be doing here. So, yeah, let's do this properly together there. But as I said, if you got so far, using a little bit of smooth here and there, just broadly speaking, may not necessarily be the worst, because you still have a lot of little subtleties left and right that you've already captured. But my preferred way is still, yet again here, just to take our clay brushes and our polish brush. So we're going to start with that, and then we will use a little bit of smooth here or there when we deal with surface that is very curvy. But for the most part, I still want to try to go on top of this with my fill brush as much as I possibly can. Let's use a very small radius here. And it is possible, though, that even with a low pen pressure, you may still get something that's a little bit too flattening, that flattens a little bit too much. Because you can see here that even if I put a little bit of pressure on my tablet, actually now it's fine. It's that Wacom bug again. Yeah, okay, no, so I think this is fine. You can see here with a very, very small amount of pressure that I'm putting on. I'm really not putting on a lot of pressure. I'm not really flattening. I am just getting rid of those little artifacts that are on the surface. I mean, I am technically flattening, but I am not. It doesn't feel like I'm really just creating new planes that were necessarily there before. You can still see that there's just a little bit of imperfection that is kind of left over here. It becomes very, very subtle, but I really like it personally. I just always find that the smooth brush is just a little too indiscriminate often. Like here, I can keep a little bit of that organicity here. You can kind of see a little bit. I can keep a little bit of that organicity better than if I was using the smooth brush. But if you're very gentle, if you're smooth brush, you're probably going to be fine too. So here we go here, doing the same thing, just very slightly just filling in. Since this is more or less a concave zone, I can't really carve. So I'm mostly just doing this by filling as opposed to carving. Although here I will alternate So I'm kind of varying the pressure that I'm putting on so that I am kind of filling in or carving off, I suppose, anything that is kind of undesirable. But you can see that obviously this takes some time, you know, this will take some time. And, you know, you could probably go over your whole head in maybe about an hour, maybe even a little bit more, you know, considering all the time that you have spent sculpting so far. 1 hour doing this, or 1 to 2 hours, really isn't that much time. So, you know, although this feels like it might be slow in the grand scheme of things, this will not represent that much time in the end. But you will get a result that will be just a little bit more organic than if you were smoothing everything. So I do recommend that you do that. You can see here that I'm actually using the grab brush here because there's a lot of little bumps over the surface that are a little bit too much. So I actually want to get rid of some of those little bumps while I'm there, you know, like just like a car, it's been kind of banged up and you just want to remove some of those, I don't know, bangs that maybe have happened somewhere on the body of the car there. So I'm kind of doing that here. I'm kind of looking in places where the surface is a little too banged up to me for my own taste. And I'm just using the grab brush here just to get rid of that a little bit. It's reading better now, so I can go back to using my fill carve brush and continue working on this. There's a lot of very high frequency information here, so it's totally legit to use the smooth brush here too a little bit just to get rid of a little bit of those extra sharp details. You know, that's totally fine. You know, obviously your smooth brush is one of your tools in your toolbox when it comes to polishing a surface. You know, it's just the thing that I say to like everyone, and that I will say here yet again, and I will probably repeat all the way to my grave is, you know, don't overdo the smooth. You know, just use a smooth brush, but use it as part of your toolbox as opposed to the only thing within your toolbox. Yeah, you can see here, by the way, like the kind of bumpiness that I have over the surface here. Trying to get rid of that using the clay brushes will probably be a little bit hard because the surface is very curvy. So this is actually one of those places where actually the best tool right now is just the grab brush. I'm just trying to pull out and push in. You can see here there's a bit of a concavity here. I could fill this in here using our standard draw brush here. That actually works well. Not a zone where the clay brushes work all that great because of the amount of curvature that there is over the surface. This is definitely one of those zones too that you know, like we are somewhat low res still. You know, you can see obviously all the polygons that I have. Once we're done with our retopology, we will we'll subdivide this at a higher resolution than this, and we will work on those nice tertiary details. And so all those polygons will obviously disappear then, and we will make sure to get a very, very nice, very high quality surface going on there. It could also be a case where remeshing this, because like the polygons elsewhere are not as big. So maybe remeshing wouldn't be a bad idea, but I've done so much work with like things like eye creases and stuff, and they're looking all like very, very sharp that I'm very wary of going on top of this with a pretty big or just remeshing the whole thing. It's probably going to make some of those creases elsewhere look kind of pixelated. I kind of want to avoid that. In fact, while I'm here, one thing we can actually talk about or just point to is you can see here the like under the lower lip here. You can see there's a bit of a shadow here that is kind of straight. It's kind of creating a bit of a triangle that is like this here. And then we have a little bit of a mass here, which is actually, there's a little bit of, there's a muscle here, so which is orbicularis oris that kind of goes all the way around the mouth. And you can see sometimes a little bit of a bump here. And I can kind of perceive it there. It's very subtle. Probably most people won't really be able to really appreciate that. But if I can at least get this nice shadow to read the same, which I could probably get easily by just taking the standard brush or the draw brush and just trying to push this in just like that. See? I can actually get a shadow that is just like our reference at a somewhat low cost in terms of time, although with my fill brush afterward, I'll just fill this in so that there's a little bit less contrast to the shadow. You know what? I wouldn't hate a material in this particular case that actually allows me to see the surface a little bit more than that. I have a little bit more contrast here. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to create a new material in this particular case that is on the head, and then we will switch. Did I just duplicate this particular material? Yeah, I did. Okay, so we have this is selected. Let's just get rid of the color in this particular case. Let's just go for RGB. And what we're going to do, we're just going to boost the metallic value on this. Yeah, you can see we're seeing a little bit more of the bumps kind of everywhere. Although at the same time, is this going to work? Yeah, I actually would really like for the light to follow exactly the placement of the camera, which we won't be able to do if we're in this material view. So actually, yeah, let's just switch this over here. I'm not a fan of matte caps usually, as you probably know. We've talked about this before, but there might be something interesting in one of these. You know what? Let's play around with this one. Let's see how we feel about it. Is where the canthal tendons are. So just gonna make sure that zone here is a little bit more bumpy on both sides, because we have that medial canthal tendon under the skin that is connecting the eyelids to the nasal bone. And the skin's very thin here, so even at that place, even just a little tendon is enough to create surface bump. By the way, one thing that I've done here on the other side, you can see I've created those tiny little wrinkles here. And I haven't done those by sculpting those in or by using the draw sharp brush, which you may think of doing. But if you do that, you're gonna get a bit of a trough. It's gonna not look all that great, maybe not all that natural. Now, the way that I've done this is once again using our polished brush here. In this case here, our fill brush. And what I'm doing is that I'm right now I'm filling, and you can see that when I'm filling, I'm winding up having a little bit of a clearer crease right under where my brush is. And so what I can do is here, just kind of follow here the crease of the eye, but then on the inside here, just look at the movement of my brush here. As I start inside the under eyelid, and I'm going to cross over the lower eyelid crease. I'm going to cross over and I'm going to continue my brush stroke on the other side. And by doing that, you can see that I can do this very nice organic shape. Because if you try to do that using the clay brushes or using a draw sharp brush, it's not gonna look as natural. Yeah, I could do it again if I want to have another one of those. May not necessarily be a bad thing. You know, I could do it here too. So once again, using our fill brush. Yeah, fill brush. There you go. Okay. So here I can do it again. As you can see, again, wind up having another little crease like this. You know, it kind of sets this up nicely for surface detailing. That we'll do later on after we have done our retopology of this head. More polish. Totally legit to smooth, very curvy zones like the nose. Because the polish brushes or the fill brush has a tendency to flatten. You don't necessarily want to flatten those volumes. Same thing, the zone here. You can't really flatten this particular zone without sacrificing or damaging the planes I have already created there. For the eyebrows, I'll keep what I have sculpted in there. We'll get rid of that once we get to subdivisions. Because having sculpted eyelashes or eyebrows at that stage really won't work anymore. And since we'll look to do some proper hair for this character sooner or later, we'll have to get rid of the sculpted eyebrows, but I'll just keep them in for now. We'll solve that after retopology is done. But yeah, you can see what I can create here. Now, I'm not sure I necessarily want to do this because she's young, but you know, using our fill brush yet again, it's great to, you know, since it flattens, you can see that I could actually, by doing a bit of a curve like this, I could actually flatten in the shape of a wrinkle. As someone who's a little bit older, this is a great way to create wrinkles without even having to do any kind of sculpting or use any kind of sharper brush there. Just by flattening, you know, being very precise with how we flatten our surface, we can create a bunch of wrinkles over the surface, just like that, in different places. As I said, this won't work in her case because she's young enough not to have those crow's feet wrinkles, although I definitely would like to continue here, just planarize a little bit this upper eyelid here a little bit more, then blend it into the rest. Blend that into the rest of the surface afterward. A little bit like that. Probably should have done that a little bit more on the other side. You can see the fact that I haven't done that mixed the zone here. Just look a little bit of a blurry mess here. So using our fill brush here, let me just flatten this here a little bit. The upper eyelid crease. It's going to continue it a little bit. It's just going to give us, yeah, I've kind of over smoothed the surface already. So just by using my fill brush here, I can't create a zone that's as nice as what we have on the other side. So you have the plane of the upper eyelid here who's continuing just a little bit further. Now, of course, things like the skull, which, you know, we won't see because it's going to be covered in hair and stuff. Just use a really big brush in this case. Once again, you could smooth this if you want. Go for it. Just using the polished brushes and doing like little circles and stuff. It's also going to work. Once again, though, do be wary of if you use a very big brush, it will modify your plane. So once again, just be wary of that. Unless your character is going to be bald. I don't care too much about the top of the head. Obviously, the shape of it is important because if you're going to throw some hair on there, the hair will inherit whatever shape you have given to the cranium. So, of course, you have to be wary of the shape of the cranium. It's as important as the rest of the head. Unless your character is wearing like a very, very, very full set of hair. Like long curly hair or something, and you're just not going to see what's going to happen under there at all in any sort of way, or your character's wearing a helmet or something, then yeah, you don't care as much. But you know, we don't care about the quality of the surface all that much, but we definitely care about the volume of it and the shape of it. Now, females have a tendency to have a slightly pointy skull, a little bit more than males, if I remember that properly. So we can definitely shape this here a little bit. I think one of the best references, if you, you know, of course, there aren't nearly as many shaved hair females as there are males around. When I see student work, one of the things I see the most is volume issues with skulls. It's one of the biggest issues that I see across heads that people sculpt is just issues with the shape of the skull and or the size of the skull. And even then, even more so in the case of students sculpting female characters as opposed to male characters, because we're just less used to seeing the skull under typically longer female hair there. But one of the references that I really like for shape of the skull is Natalie Portman. There's quite a lot of shots of her that's easy to find on Google with shaved hair. And you can really appreciate the shape of the skull there. And if you do Google pictures of her, take a look at how the skull looks from front view, because you'll see that the top of it is very pointy in her case. I mean, very is maybe not very, but it is definitely pointy. You can see that there's a little bit of pointiness to it. So do Google that if you're in any way interested by the shape of female skulls, and if you are in a situation where you will have to sculpt those. Because as I said, that's one of the biggest issues that I see come back. I'm not talking here about like subtle details like, let's say, I don't know, the occipital protuberance. But I am talking about just general volume is just completely off, you know. And yet so much depends from it. So much depends on the skull. Like reading a face correctly from front view like this depends entirely on the skull having the proper shape and size. So it is very, very important. I do want to make it a little bit pointier in this particular case. So let me just use a very, very big fill brush here so I can just do a little bit of a very gentle flattening, as you can see. Yeah, see, this is a little bit pointier. This is nice. There's a little bit more of a bump here, so let me just shave that off here. Very nice. If we want to be a little bit fancier for our skull, we could also push in here. Let me use the standard brush here, the sculpt draw. Brush with a very low intensity, or rather, not a lot of pressure here. And I'm just going to push in here a little bit, like a bit of a Y shape. This isn't necessarily the best brush to use, but hopefully this should still come out all right. Yeah, it's not uncommon to see skulls like these with this kind of shape, a little bit of a cavity there. We could maybe keep it. I don't know whether she has that or not, but it's very common to have that kind of shape there, like which looks like a very vague kind of Y-shaped trough, or I guess this would be technically like a bit of a V here, but I guess Y if you consider the suture that is behind it. So like this shape here is actually created because of the sutures between the frontal bone and the parietal bones. So the two bones here that are on both sides, which also those two bones also meet in the middle. Of course, they get fused down the middle here, and they don't necessarily always fuse so that they are perfectly resting as a curved surface here. They will often fuse in a way where there's a little bit of an angle like that, which is why you have that bump there, why certain people have that bump there. Because those sutures, you know, sometimes they're caving in a little bit, or sometimes they're pushing out a little bit, which is why the suture that is here, which is between the parietal bones that are here and the frontal bone. And there's also the temporal bone here for where the suture of escapes me here a little bit right now. But the basic idea is that you'll see sutures here that will kind of take a little bit of Y shape here. So it kind of makes it so that for certain people, you have a little bit of a cavity like that can look a little bit funny. So as I said, I don't know whether she would have that or not, but let's just imagine that she does. So, you know, when you look at a face here from front, you just have a little bit of a cavity there, which can actually look quite nice. It's a nice way to add a little bit of character, perhaps, to a skull. If you're working on a skull for someone where you will be able to appreciate this shape of the skull itself, you know, maybe someone who has shaved hair or very short hair, you know, it can be a way to just add a little bit of style to your skull, perhaps. But skulls are one of the most neglected parts of studying anatomy, I feel like. There's so many people who neglect ever kind of studying the skull and the shape of it and proportions of it. And, well, it's a little bit sad because the skull is actually extremely important to the overall head, of course. One thing I could add here too as well is, well, a little bit more of the back border for the temporalis muscle. The temporalis is a muscle that kind of fits in here. So you have the temporal line, which in this case is starting to look a little bit lost here. If I flatten this here, I think I can bring it back. I'm trying to actually push it up here a little bit, and then let me use a little bit of that basic draw brush just to pull it out here a little bit more on this side here. So anyway, so you have the temporal line. So you have the temporalis, which fits within the temporal fossa. And sometimes you will see the back of it here a little bit like that. And when you've got it back, you'll see there's a little bit of a volume here. So you get a little bit of a depression here. I'm forgetting where the back border is here exactly right now. There's also some of the muscles that pull on the ear that also attach in that particular zone. But the basic idea is that you will sometimes see a little bit of a bump like that. So if I switch over here to our polish brushes here, I'm just going to polish this here a little bit. And this here too a little bit. Anyway, so you see a little bit of a bump like that. She is frowning there a little bit. So her eyebrows look lower in the reference because she's frowning, which is the same reason why the upper eyelid crease is much shorter in the case of the reference. I'm always resisting, but I think in this case it would be the right thing to make the nose a little bit more drooping, but I feel as if that's kind of what's going on here. So let me just move this down here a little bit. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. Those nostrils are too big. I love the shape of her upper lip here. It's so beautiful. It's so nice. She's really I find her really pretty in an interesting way. Which, you know how there's people which are like, they look good, but they're also kind of look like everyone else kind of does. So you're like, yeah, you look good, but you're not all that interesting, you know, like as a face to look at for like a while. Emily Blunt's not like that. She's got this really beautiful face, but that also is slightly uncommon, which just makes her all that more interesting to look at. I need to move the jaw back a little bit. Oh yeah, there were a bunch of things about the shape of the neck now that I think about it. So is this too far forward? Is this still too far forward? You know, the neck, the skull, these things are so important to reading a face properly, and they're so often neglected. Or at the very least, people neglect to kind of take the time to seriously study those. I think one of the final things that I would reduce on this is a little bit of the jowl fat. Maybe just a little too strong. I don't really want to feel those marionette lines. Yeah, could probably go even further than that, actually. Just here just a little bit. I just want to, it's going to DH her a little bit. I think I'm getting pretty satisfied with this. I'm not sure whether we've really hit that 95% in the end or not. May not be a bad idea to just reduce the cheeks just a little bit. I think it's just time, just a little bit too strong. So in the end, I guess it's a good question whether I've hit that 95% mark or not. I guess I'll let you be the judge of that. So that was our third and final sculpting pass over our Emily Blunt portrait within Blender. If your head is all filled up here and ready to explode with a lot of anatomical details, I do invite you to go and check out those facial anatomy classes on outgang.studio, because we do a very, very deep dive of all of the facial features, structures, facial fat pads, and muscles that you need to know to really master facial anatomy sculpting. Next class, then, we will move on to retopology of this particular head, which will also set us up really nicely afterward to start to talk about skin pores and other high-frequency surface details that we can throw on this head. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.